From inside the UN General Assembly Hall. They are about to take their seats. This is one of the highlights of the UN calendar, really. All 193 members of the United Nations represented inside the General Assembly Hall, all of them getting a chance to vote on those 5 new non-permanent members. Now, in theory, they have an hour-and-a-half block in which the voting can take place. It might happen a little bit quicker than that, especially if they take their seats quickly. We could be hearing a result within the next hour. But remember, South Africa running uncontested for that African seat. They need to get 2/3, but that in itself is looking pretty much guaranteed. So we're not at this stage saying that it is a shoo-in, but it does seem almost certain that within an hour and a half's time, we will know that South Africa is once again rejoining the Security Council.
That's exactly what I wanted to find out, Nick. But let's talk about the benefits that South Africa would actually gain should they actually acquire the seat.
Well, it allows them to have a voice in the most premier body for international peace and security. That is what the United Nations Security Council is tasked with. It's a 15-member body, so 15 countries sit on the council. There are 5 permanent members: the United States, the UK, France, China and Russia, and those other 10 non-permanent seats rotate every 2 years. So it really does give them a seat at the table to be able to discuss some of the most pressing issues that the world is currently facing. Things like the Israel-Palestine situation, things like the civil war that's still raging in Syria, but also, of course, looking at the many conflict and peacekeeping missions across the African continent. It is an important position and certainly will raise South Africa's profile, really allowing them to push their international perspective to the rest of the world.
All right, and Nick, I mean, you say it's a 15-member council that is, of course, that South Africa is seeking that non-permanent member. But as things stand now, you did mention earlier on that it looks like a pretty cut and dry deal that South Africa is going to get that seat. But what would the members need to look at for in order for them to vote for putting South Africa in that seat?
Well, South Africa, I think, has a very strong track record, especially when it comes to the United Nations Security Council, having been on it twice within the last 12 years. During those occasions, they were able to steer foreign policy and those matters of international dispute in a very clear way. They also have a track record of aiming for that multilateralism, that multinationalism, where they want to try and promote this idea of standing up for all nations. I think coming with those sort of ideals certainly helps them. I was speaking to the Minister for International Relations and Cooperation, Minister Sisulu, last night, and she said that she had her fingers crossed for the election, but was certainly very hopeful. And she spoke about the idea of bringing the legacy of Nelson Mandela, bringing those ideals and values to the international stage. She said that this was a very good way of being able to honour Madiba's legacy, to be able to bring his idea of standing up for human rights to the world stage. So I think with that legacy, with that background, with that track record, it certainly puts South Africa in a very strong position to be voted on by the other UN members.
All right, Nick, I mean, looking at the African representation there, it would seem like South Africa would be the only representative representing the whole African continent. And talk us how now this, how it would work in terms of resolving the global issues like the trade imbalance as well as peacekeeping, like I said in my intro.
Well, a whole range of issues across a whole range of continents and countries that the Security Council has to try and get to grips with. Some of those are essentially intractable problems that the Council hasn't been able to unpick for many, many years. The problems in Syria, the problems in the Middle East. We see very clear divisions, especially among the permanent members of the Security Council. Not to overgeneralize, but the Western countries on one side, Russia on the other. For example, when it comes to Syria. Some of the peacekeeping problems, there is perhaps more unity amongst the council members. South Africa will be able to throw its weight behind the idea of giving more governance to individual countries, but also trying to bolster peacekeeping. South Africa is very keen to try and get more female peacekeepers within the UN missions. But it does hope to be able to bring something of a different dynamic to the council, to perhaps be able to weigh in and help with some of those seemingly unsolvable problems.
Okay, thank you so much. That is our correspondent there in New York, Nick Harper. And of course, it was taking us through the Security Council's vote that is to take place, or has started to take place right now. And South Africa, they're seeking a permanent non-executive seat on the council. And Nick says we should be expecting the results in an hour. And it looks like a given that South Africa, given its strong presence in the global trade as well as markets, it looks like it's going to be a cut and dry. It's going to be granted that non-permanent seat. Peter?